For any quadratic equation of the form ax squared plus bx plus c, the solutions may be found using the quadratic formula. Now, you will have to have a value for a just because you have to have a squared term to make it a quadratic. B and or c could be 0. Line all your terms up on one side of the equation and identify your a, b, and c. Let's get to it. Our first example, we have 2x squared minus x minus 1 equals 0. All terms are in order and on one side of the equation. A is 2, b is negative 1, c is also negative 1. Using the quadratic formula above, negative b plus minus square root b squared minus 4 times a times c, all of it, long fraction bar, 2 times a. The top left, two negatives make a positive 1. Compute the numbers under the radical. This is called a discriminant. Just the numbers add up to 9. It's a good idea to just do the numbers because we're not always guaranteed that the sum will be a perfect square. In this case it is, though. Square root of 9 is 3. 1 plus or minus 3, all divided by 4. When you add, 1 plus 3 is 4, divided by 4 is 1. When you subtract, 1 minus 3 is negative 2, over 4 is negative half. These are your two solutions. They're unique, and both of them will solve the quadratic equation. In the next example, we have 9x squared plus 42x plus 49 equals 0. They're in order and on one side of the equation. So a is 9, b is 42, c is 49. Using the quadratic formula, up here in purple, I wrote it down again just for convenience. Our solutions are negative 42 plus or minus 42 squared minus 4 times 9 times 49. Only calculate the highlighted numbers, and it turns out the answer is 0. Over 2 times 9, that's 18. So negative 42 plus or minus 0 over 18. Negative 42 over 18 reduces to negative 7/3. So this is the only solution to this equation. Let's look at some applications. Excuse me. A floor is 14 feet longer than it is wide. The area of the floor is 1,395 square feet. Write a quadratic equation for the area of the floor in terms of width. Area is length times width. We were told the length is 14 feet more than the width, so we can rewrite length as W plus 14. Width, we'll just leave it W. Distributing W, that's W squared plus 14W. And that's how we write area in terms of width. Because the area is 1,395 square feet, we can replace A with that number, setting that equal to W squared plus 14W. We need to note that that is quadratic, but we need to bring this 1395 over. When you cross the equals, that number will go from positive to negative. You can take the time to factor. It will factor. You just have to find two numbers that add up to 14 and have a product of negative 1395. That could take some time, but we also have quadratic formula to fall back on. A is 1, B is 14, and C is negative 1395. Those are highlighted here in purple. So W is our variable. W is equal to minus 14 plus or minus 14 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 1395 all over 2 times 1. So we have negative 14. The value underneath, again, it's called the discriminant, is 5776. All that's still over 2. The square root of 5776 is 76. So let's add negative 14 plus 76, that's 62, divided by 2 is 31. When we subtract, we get negative 90, divided by 2 is negative 45. Since we are talking about width of a floor, 31 is the only one that makes sense. Now, when you add 14 to that, you get 45. So over here at your lower left corner, the width is 31. Add 14, that tells us the length has to be 45. If you multiply these two numbers together, you will get 1395. And then finally, we did this one in class together, and it was a monster. So I'll probably have to do several pan-arounds. Let's read it first. A gardener has 100 meters of fencing to enclose 2 adjacent rectangular gardens. The gardener wants the enclosed area to be 286 square meters. What dimensions should the gardener use? Now, from our layout, we have 2 X's across the front and a Y down the side. As far as fencing goes, you can tell that there are 1, 2, 3, 4 parts that have X and a total of 3 parts that are Y. So this equation given in the diagram is for the fencing. 4 X's total, front and back, plus 3 Y's total, left, center, and right, will take up the 100 meters of fencing. Let's solve this for Y. Subtract 4 X's. 3Y is equal to negative 4X plus 100. Divide all the way through by 3. Y is equal to negative 4/3 X plus 100 over 3. I'm going to put a box around this because we're going to come back to it. Let's also take note that the gardener wants the area to be 286 square meters. Now, area is just simply length times width. It doesn't have to have all the front, backs, and sides like the fencing. Area, that's 2 X's times a single Y, length times width. That's got to be 286. So area is 2x times y, length times width. That's got to be 286. This y we can replace with negative 4/3 x plus 100. I was telling you to save that. This boxed value, I'm going to replace y with the x side of it. 2x times the swap out, the substitute for y, that's negative 8/3 x squared plus 200/3 x equals 286. To get rid of all these fractions, I'm going to multiply every single term by 3. That will leave negative 8x squared plus 200x. 286 times 3 is 858 because of the quadratic, but that's negative. I'm going to bring these two terms over to the right side, and that way this term will go positive, this will go negative. 858 didn't move, so it stays positive. And now we can solve that using quadratic formula. A is 8, B is negative 200, C is 858. That tells us that X is going to be negative 200, which is positive 200, plus minus negative 200 squared minus 4 times 8 times 858, that's b squared minus 4ac, all over 2a, that's 2 times 8, which is 16. The highlighted portion, the discriminant, has a total of 12,544, which square roots exactly to 112. Using the sum 200 plus 112 divided by 16 is 19 and a half. Using the minus sign, 200 minus 112 divided by 16 is 5 and a half. So there's two possible layouts. Layout 1, and I underlined it in orange, because x is 19 and a half. If you look at your area formula, 2x times y is equal to, 286. I'm going to draw an arrow down here. Okay, so let's take 19.5, plug it in for x. 286 divided by 2 times 19.5, that's 286 over 39, 22 over 3 when you reduce. 22 thirds is 7.3 repeating. So one layout would be where your x's are 19.5 and your y is 7.3. And these again are in meters. The other possible layout is if x is 5.5, underlined it in red. So over here at your lower left, 286 divided by 2 times 5.5, that's 286 divided by 11, which is 26 on the dot. So another possible layout would be 5.5 by 26 meters. This problem was a doozy. And of course, I will be more than happy to help you out in class. If you run into this and for some reason you just can't get it solved, don't feel bad. It takes a lot to solve this one.